Show me a move. Good news, everyone. Don't you little giddy when you see onions?
Welcome to 20th Century Boy. My name is Radio Mike. This is the inside of my mind. Hello everybody, how are you? I hope you're doing well. I am doing well. I am Radio Mike, Australia's most lovable nerd, and this is my podcast, 20th Century Boy, a podcast about me and my life navigating my mid-20s, being a millennial, living by myself, and the journey into adulthood, and my working life as a radio and podcast producer and wannabe comedy guy from Melbourne, Australia. Thanks for joining me. And in case you're wondering, yes, I am still calling myself Radio Mike. I'm sure you've all heard the news that an article was run that mentioned me this week and didn't just describe me as Radio Mike. And this is actually where I want to start today because I just found this so funny. This choice of language that a website has used was just really, really interesting. So basically, there is a website called radiotoday.com.au, which is like an internal radio industry publication that posts all the news and gossip about radio and the radio business. And they've actually run a really interesting story about the show Morning Wood, which is a show that I've been working with two of my good mates, Zach and Josh, on. And they've actually written this. This is a quote from the article. The operation takes place in a tin shed in Collingwood, and the pair are joined by, wait for it, the pair are joined by radio comic and host Mike Liberale, that's me, aka Radio Mike of 20th Century Boy and the Hamish and Andy podcast. Sorry, let's rewind a sec. The pair are joined by radio comic and host Mike Liberale. Radio comic. Apparently, I am now a radio comic, according to this publication. However, the more I think about it, the more inaccurate I feel this title is. I am not a radio comic. In fact, I'm barely a comic. I guess, I don't think any of my quote-unquote comedy, and if you do find this podcast funny, thank you, I appreciate it. I guess the idea of this podcast is to be a light-hearted comedy podcast that explores my life and gets you guys involved in that. But if anything, but I don't think much of my comedy has ever been on radio. In fact, I'm actually currently doing no work in radio. At the moment, I am not working on any radio at all. That's primarily because of the pandemic situation. I float around radio stations here in Melbourne. There hasn't really been any work. I've pretty much exclusively been working in the podcast space at the moment. So I'm not doing any radio. In the past, I've paneled a lot of radio shows. I've filled in on a lot of radio shows. I've anchored some radio shows. And that's great. And I love working on radio. But I don't know if that means I get to be called a radio comic. I find that very interesting. And it's starting to raise this issue of my branding of Radio Mike. Because funnily enough, Zach Mander, welcome to the radio family, Zach Mander, who is Zach from the comedy group Collective Noun, he's actually linked me this article this morning. This is how I found out about it. And he said, "This sounds cool, man, but radio comic is a title I have not heard used before. Did you make it up or did they?" And I said, I did not make it up. I have no idea what that means. And I guess on other shows, sometimes I'm referred to as Podcast Mike, but I would like to keep the branding as Radio Mike. That name is based on the Simpsons episode Radio Bart, which is the Timmy O'Toole episode of The Simpsons for Simpsons fans. You will know it. And for those who are long-time listeners of this show, you will know that I originally wanted to be called Sideshow Mike after Sideshow Bob from The Simpsons. But when I brought that up with Luke and Lewis, whose show I was paneling at the time I created the name Radio Mike, they laughed in my face. So I went home and decided on Radio Mike because the Simpsons episode was called Radio Bart. And I thought, I could be Radio Mike. Now, I assume usually the way these press sort of things work is like, someone from Radio Today has finds something out, wants a story, and they'll go to the source to get some information. So they probably went to Zach and Josh and said, "Hey, we want to just do a write-up about your new show. Can you give us some information on it?" So I guess my question now is, did Zach and Josh, my friends, feed to the guy from Radio Today that I am a radio comic? Like, who came up with this name? I don't understand it. So that's why I thought the best way for me to find this out is to also go straight to the source, which is why I'm joined by another Zach Miller from The Morning Wood Show, and Zach and Josh. He's on the line now to clear this up for me. Zach, are you there?
Yeah, Mikey, how are you, mate?
Good, man. Thanks for joining me on the show on your first appearance.
It is an honour. I'm very, very glad to be on. And we should probably clear this up.
Yeah, we need to clear this up because, so as I've explained to the listeners, radiotoday.com.au has described me as a radio comic, and what I've been racking my brains on is, did you feed this to them? Did you describe me as such, or have they just made it up? Like, have they just pulled it out of their asses pretty much?
Well, it's funny you ask. So I read that article at a similar time, and going through it, they'd said a lot of what we had said. This wasn't some like Frost Nixon style interview. They just sent us like 2 questions. We replied. And we'd written you down as radio.mike, Mike Liberale. So initially, I thought that they'd just made a typo, like an autocorrect to radio comic. Then I reread it. Maybe it means radio co-mic, like you're sort of co-hosting the show. Alternatively, so nothing that we sent through, nor did we sort of laud your comedic skills, though they are great at any point. But they seem to have just sort of taken your role and run with it.
Well, that's the thing, because it was actually another Zach Mander from Collective Noun, who brought this to my attention this morning. He said, "Hey man, this sounds cool, but did you tell them you're a radio comic? Because I don't think any of your content has ever been on radio." And I was like, I didn't tell them that. What the hell?
That's also a great point. Is really, yeah, you're a podcast comic.
If anything, I would say I would be a podcast comic, yeah.
Have you thought about a rebrand?
Well, I've thought about this a lot because Will Anderson on his podcast refers to me as Podcast Mike, and I feel like the branding is just starting to get cluttered. Now I have to describe myself as a radio comic. It's just gonna, like, I just want it to be Radio Mike, and that's what I wanted from the start.
Yeah, look, I think people are putting labels on you, man. They're trying to box you in to something that you're not. I think this was born of Radio Bart, right? I still haven't seen The Simpsons do a podcast episode. I can't imagine that's coming anytime soon.
Yeah, well, the Radio Mike name came from the Simpsons episode Radio Bart. That is correct.
Yeah, I think you need to stay true to that. So, Radio Co-Mike, as a nod to radiotoday.com.au's great description of you, could work. We could fold that in. I've already renamed you in my phone.
Radio Comic, Radio Co-Mike is coming at you. Hey, thanks for clearing that up, man. I just wanted to make sure you weren't feeding fake titles of what my job is to news outlets. So it's good to know you're not, and I can still trust you.
I'm glad you gave me this platform to clear my name. Thanks, Mikey.
Well, you know how many listeners we have. Your name is going to be officially cleared worldwide, so you're very lucky I gave you the chance. And if you want to hear more of the sweet dulcet tones of Zach Miller and Josh Perring, check out Morning Wood, their podcast as well, which is a Spotify radio show. Do you want to talk? Let's quickly talk about that, because I've mentioned it on this show before, but it's a Spotify radio show.
Man, I've heard you talk about it before. Really appreciate it. And not to take up too much time, but I'll let the team know. Look, Josh and I, we put together a radio show on Spotify. It's a curated playlist. It's got different breaks where we're talking smack with Mikey, as I'm sure your listeners love, to hear his opinions on the world. Plus, we put in good music in between. So it's really the radio feel, bite-sized content with on-demand service. So, mate, we're doing it all. We're revolutionising the world. And look, we really appreciate you being a part of it, man.
Yeah, it's a really great idea, and it's really fun to listen to. Like, especially if you're like cleaning the house or something, just going in between like radio style breaks and music. So
when we were putting this together, that's really the demographic we were targeting. We said as long as people are cleaning their house and listening to this podcast, we'll know we've done something right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's it. Clean your house, listen to this show. Radio
Morning
Comic
Wood.
is on it.
That's it.
Zach, Josh,
yeah, exactly.
and Radio Comic, Radio Co-Mike. Thanks for
Radio
joining me, man.
Mike. Hey, thanks. It's a pleasure.
Well, there you go, guys. I am now Radio Co-Mike, Radio Comic, Radio Co-Mike, Radio Mike. So feel free to address me as any of those if you like, but I'd prefer just Radio Mike. On another note, and still talking about me and podcasting and everything like that, I have officially decided that I am now declaring war on a man who is on the #1 breakfast radio show in Melbourne. In fact, the namesake of said show. I am declaring war on Christian O'Connell. The reason I am doing this is because Christian O'Connell constantly makes fun of me on his radio show. If you don't know, he does the Christian O'Connell Show on Gold 104, a very popular and successful show here in Melbourne, and his co-host and sidekick on air is my friend Jack Post. And sometimes, Jack will bring me up on the show because he's telling stories from me and him hanging out or whatever it might be. So, Christian O'Connell this week has decided to target me and berate me with insults about me again when Jack brought me up. Now, another plug, Jack did launch a podcast this week and it's called Jacky Road Studios, and I was the first guest on the show. It was great fun doing it. I highly recommend checking it out. Basically, the concept is Jack interviews a guest, and from there, at the end, he will write a song based on that discussion. So I think it's a really unique podcast format, and I think it's so different to just, someone sits down and does an interview with someone else. Like, it's about him getting to know people and then growing as a songwriter, which I just think is super cool. Here's a grab from that podcast here.
Did you ever have a period where, because you were a singer and a choir boy at school, did you ever have a dream of being in a band?
Yeah, there was a high school band that was called The Upper Hand. My friend Tim was in it, and Tim wanted me to be the singer, but I didn't want to be the singer in the band, so another guy ended up being the singer in that band, and then they did a performance in Year 9 at Assembly of Chuck Berry's song Johnny Be Good.
Yep.
And I saw this guy singing and he was so good, and I was like, that could have been me. And I regretted it ever since then. And we talked about heaps. We talk a lot about music because that's kind of the style of the podcast, but we talked about heaps of stuff. So I'd love for you to check it out. It's called Jacky Road Studios. And when Jack announced on his radio show, the Christian O'Connell Show, that I would be the first guest on the podcast, here is how Christian O'Connell responded to him.
Comes out on Monday. It's called Jacky Road Studios.
All right, so you say interesting people. You know Hamish, you know Andy, you know me, you know everyone. Croft. Who do you start with, Hamish or Andy? That's tough.
My friend Mike, Radio Mike, who was in the band with me, is my first guest. But then I'll work my way up.
They always say start with the best guest, right? When I launched this podcast, I've been working on the last 6 months. We're launching with Ricky Gervais or Russell Brand. Your mate Mike.
That's a great one, and I would love one day.
I'll get Russell to come on. Are you billing it as this episode? I interview famous people, interesting people. My mate Mike.
I didn't say famous people. I said interesting people.
Right. Okay.
So Radio Mike is guest number one.
Who next?
Then after that is...
There's no one, is there?
I haven't done it yet. I haven't done it
Plug
yet.
something which has got one episode with your mate Mike. Presses buttons on radio shows for a living. Bless him. That's your first guest.
And this is what I want to know, Christian. Why do you hate me? Why do you hate me, Radio Mike, an up-and-coming young gun here in Melbourne who loves your show, just wants to try and make it in this ragtag world of radio and podcasting, and every time I listen, you're bringing me down. Again, long-time listeners of the show will know this is not the first time Christian O'Connell has made jabs at my low level of prominence in the world on his show. Yes, Christian, you are more famous than me. I understand that. But it's not about fame. It's about integrity. And I'm tired of you bringing me down, man. And that's why, from all of us here at 20th Century Boy, we're declaring war on the Christian O'Connell show. Now, I think a great way for you guys to help facilitate this war is by, if you interact with Christian in any way, whether that's digitally or in real life, I think someone did write once that Christian had come into the coffee shop that they worked at to get a coffee. Now, I guess all I want is if you ever see or interact with Christian in any way, I think you should say, hey man, Radio Mike was a great guest on Jack's show. Have you heard it? Not even in an aggressive way. Make it like a subtle thing. Like, don't let him know that we're doing it, but just be like, hey, did you listen to Jack's podcast? Radio Mike was great. That guy's got tons of potential. Say stuff like that to him. And then, but I just feel like if enough people are saying that to him, I guess if he doesn't hear this and catch on that we're deliberately doing it to psych him out, right? Then maybe he'll start to change his opinion, be like, oh, Radio Mike's actually like, he's pretty big. This guy's the real deal. I got to stop bullying him on my show. That's what I want us to do. I want to psych him out subtly. We're not doing an aggressive war. We're doing a subliminal war. You know, we're Eva Netanyahu-ing this kind of thing. If you don't know, that's another Simpsons reference because Eva Netanyahu is join the Navy backwards. If you haven't seen that episode, what are you doing? But yeah, I think what we're doing is Eva Netanyahu-ing Christian O'Connell, and we're going, hey, Christian, Jack's podcast, like, I think lead it with Jack's podcast being great. Be like, hey, Christian, Jack's podcast is so good. That Radio Mike guy on the first step was really funny. Do you know him? And just I think that's how we're going to handle it, at least for now. So let me know how you go with it. If you follow him on Insta or Twitter or anything, maybe just do a comment, you know, call into the show even and just say, hey man, that Radio Mike guy on Jack's podcast has big potential. That's what I want to start happening. Thanks for your support in the war. If you're new to this podcast, first of all, welcome. And I assure you it's not always me talking about the journalistic creations of jobs by radio-based websites and me declaring war on much bigger and more successful personalities. But if you are new to the show, you are automatically inducted to the listenership of this podcast, which is the radio family. So welcome to the radio family from all of us here. The radio family is the collective of listeners. It is the group of us. It is everyone that is listening. And I had some really lovely messages come in via Instagram this week. One of them came from radio DJ Marky Mark. And radio DJ Marky Mark, I assume you are a DJ, and welcome to the radio family. He said, and this was really great to read. Hey, Mike, just wanted to DM you to say I found the first step of 20th Century Boy really inspiring, which the first step came out over a year ago, and it's cool that people are going back and listening to the start. The first year of this podcast was a bit different, and that's cool. So if you are new, maybe just start at 2020, or feel free to go back to the start. I don't really mind. He said, my brother is struggling to work out what he wants to do with his life. He started down the same career path as me. Oh, so he was a DJ. And so I'm going to show him your first step because he used to love and be awesome at filmmaking, but it was just a bit of a hobby. And I think he stopped because there was no viable career paths. So I'm going to encourage him to give his lifelong dream a crack. So thanks, man. Love being part of the radio family. It's such a cool community that I really appreciate being a part of, and that's part of my daily life now. So thanks, man. You've built something that I don't think you would have been able to dream of 5 years ago, mid-existential crisis, and it's cool that this is really just the beginning of an exciting career for you. So thanks so much, man. And I believe in the first episode of this podcast, I was talking about my kind of struggles with growing up and going from like the ages of 18 to like 23, which were probably some of the hardest times of my life. And I feel like I talked just a bit about my struggles to figure out what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go and who I wanted to be and all of those things. And I actually talked about this a little bit on Jack's podcast as well, where he asked me to bring a song to the show to start the episode with, to like launch off discussion. And the song I chose was actually the song Longview by Green Day. And I felt as though that song totally just encapsulated my life finishing school and going to uni. Because if you don't know, it's basically a song about being bored, and it's a song about just not knowing what to do with your time and feeling really stuck in your own life. And one of the main messages I put across in that first episode was that you should just pursue your dreams, because I think the comparison I made was that eventually you will die, and if you subscribe to the fact that you will, enter the pit of oblivion upon your own death, which I do, then logically you should just follow your goals, because you should pretty much just do what you want to do or do what you can do to achieve your dreams rather than not doing that. And that's kind of what I've tried to live by as I've continued going about my life. So it's good that people are kind of getting something out of what I said over a year ago. Another message came in from Radio Katrina. Welcome to the Radio Family, Radio Katrina, who says, my husband sent me the link to your podcast and I just needed to thank you. I've got too much in my brain and forgot that I can hold every thought hostage. Felt like I was alone in this, but I'm not. Thanks for sharing your heart and brain for the greater good of others. And I really appreciate that, because I know I think a lot of people struggle with their mental health, particularly in their early 20s, because they're starting to come out of this structure of being a student and being at school and kind of being a kid and turning into an adult, or at least, a wannabe adult, and trying to get your life together. And I think people really struggle with that. And it takes a lot of work to figure out like what you want to be, and to figure out that your thoughts don't necessarily have to be dominating you if they're negative. Like, you can change your thoughts. So it's always really great reading those. Another one came in from Radio Pat Hamilton. Welcome to the Radio Family, Radio Pat Hamilton. He just said John. And the reason he said John is obviously, if you're a long-time listener, because of the phenomenon, which is my theory that everybody has an Uncle John. If you don't have an uncle called John, then it is very likely that your dad's name is John. And if neither your uncle or dad are called John, either your grandfather or you are called John. That's the phenomenon. So if it applies to you, just send me a message saying John. There are plenty of ways to interact with other people in the Radio Family. There is a nice little community building, as you can see. The best way to do that at the moment is to join the Discord. There is a link in the podcast description, but if you just hit me up on Instagram or wherever, you can get a link straight from me. And the Discord is a lot of fun. There's also a Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/20th Century Boy. That is also pretty active. Email me anytime, radiomikepod@gmail.com, Instagram radio.mike, and Twitter it's Radio Mike. Always looking for more interactions, and the Radio Family helps build the show. You guys help build the show with the stuff that you send me. The Discord, as I said, is definitely where shit is just taking off. It is where so much of the content of this show is coming from, and so much stuff happens there every night. The main story arc for the Discord is that someone joined the Discord and explained that, and complained, didn't explain, they complained that there were too many threads. So basically in Discord, you make threads and people can write in different threads. It's sort of like a live forum. And basically this guy complained about there being too many threads. So what we did was we created a complaints channel. So people can go in there and complain, which is what people are doing. Every time someone wants to complain, they post in the complaints channel. There's also a channel called It Is Raining, and you only post in that channel if it is raining where you are. A lot of people have been misusing that thread, so a lot of people, rightly so, get very angry in the thread when people aren't using the thread correctly. For example, Radio Bay Gadosi, welcome to the Radio Family, Bay Gadosi, he said, it looks like it might rain, which is not an appropriate use of the It Is Raining thread, because you only do it when it is raining. But on the other hand, Radio Nick, and welcome to the Radio Family, Radio Nick, he actually just posted, I see rain, and that is a great way of using the thread. That is a creative way of using it. The most recent thread that we've created in there, and this is the call out I want to do today, we have created the thread in the Discord, the My Name is Damien thread. And it says at the top, you may only post in this thread if your name is Damien. Now, currently, there are no Damiens in the Discord. So this is my call out to you. If your name is Damien, please join the Discord, do whatever you can to get in the Discord, and post in the My Name is Damien thread. We really, really need a Damien running the My Name is Damien thread. So if your name is Damien, please get in the My Name Damien thread. But seriously, guys, get in the Discord. It's a lot of fun in there. Speaking of the Radio Family, there was a big scare last week because one of our most loyal listeners, the favourite best friend of the show, Radio Nacho Cheez, who sends in a monthly update to this podcast. He didn't send in an update last week, and we were all very, very confused. This man has been the most loyal listener of the show, sending in a monthly update via voicemail every single show, and for whatever reason, last week we didn't hear from him. Now, I can confirm that I have spoken to Radio Nacho Cheez since last week's episode. And I can also confirm that he is okay. I received a very interesting email from Nacho Cheez with the subject line, "I'm sorry." And I want to say, Radio Nacho Cheez, first of all, welcome again to the radio family. You never need to be sorry. That's what I'll start with. And he said, "Dear Radio Mike, please find attached an apology audio file. Sincerest apologies, Colonel Cheddar." Now, we know that Radio Nacho Cheez goes by several different names. He's gone by Dr. Cheez, Professor Cheez, now Colonel Cheddar. Lots of different names. We believe that's because he may be actually a criminal on the run, and he has to use pseudonyms all the time, but we're not sure, and we do not judge. Now, before I play this, I want to just disclaim that I sent a message to Nacho Cheez saying, "Is everything okay?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm okay, don't worry, just been really busy at the moment and I'm really stressed out." And he also says he's loving the Dave and Mike spin-off, which is a spin-off show of this show if you've been listening to the past few episodes. So here's what Radio Nacho Cheez wanted to say to all of you as part of the radio family.
Dear Mike and the radio family, I must apologise to you for missing my weekly update whilst I was feeling blue. These feelings I was having should never have been an excuse. As for my radio family, I must cut myself loose. Knowing I've let people down far and wide has given me a sense as if my heart has cried. When I started ringing the number a long time ago, I never knew that it would be something that could come and grow. Having imposter syndrome is something I feel, as being the best friend of this community is simply unreal. I will never let the family down again. This friendship we have is something I hope to mend. This poem is now over. I will allow my soul to sleep. The decision is yours, Mike, trash or keep. Love you, Mike and the family. I pray for health and forgiveness. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, so first of all, Radio Nacho Cheez, we definitely still want you to be the best friend of the show. Everyone was worried about you. We're really glad to hear that you're okay. Some very profound stuff you said in there. And my advice to you is just keep going. We want to hear from you every month. We want a monthly update, but if you don't want to do it, man, that's cool. No one's going to judge you from stepping away from it. You have been the best friend of this show, but sometimes even best friends need a break, and we'll all get that. We totally get that. I guess if there's one thing, a lot of support came in for you via 1-800-GET-FUCKED, 1-800-438-353, the official phone number of this podcast. For example, this came in from an anonymous member of the radio family. I don't know who it is because they didn't leave their name, but here's their message.
G'day, Dr. Cheez. We missed you on the podcast this week. So we let you know we all appreciate the positivity you add to the show, and we look forward to hearing you back on in the future whenever you're ready.
So, Colonel Cheddar, Dr. Narch, Professor Narch, I just need you to know that you are respected, cared for, and valued by the radio family. And we do hope that at the end of June we get a monthly update. But if not, we're going to be cool with it, man. You need to spread your wings and fly if that's what you need to do. Nacho Cheez, hashtag spread your wings. And if you land here, that's great. But if it means you're migrating to another land, we get that. Very bad analogy there. Don't know why it's a bird-related analogy for Nacho Cheez, but yeah. Speaking of birds, though. Chirp, chirp. It's time for Radio Mike's Bird Stories. There is a segment we do on this show. It is called Bird Stories, but it has recently been redubbed How to Get Away with Burder. And that is because most of your bird stories do contain stories of you guys accidentally killing your pet birds, which is really worrying from me. But I've decided that we are officially making a brand new opener for this segment, retitling it How to Get Away with Burder. And, well, let's do one today.
How to Get Away with Burder.
So this week's submission for How to Get Away with Burder, and we did take a bit of a break from this segment because it just became too gruesome, but I feel like we're ready to go with it again. It comes in from Radio Mark. Welcome to the Radio Family, Radio Mark. And it says, hey Radio Mike, as the bird stories increasingly became Burder stories, I remembered a tale from my youth. My grandma lives in a granny flat with us and got a little budgie named Charlie. As you can imagine though, bird life living with an old lady is quite boring, and Charlie grew very quiet, and over time my mum became convinced that Charlie had depression from being stuck inside. Absolutely awful. So we decided to bring Charlie over once a week to sit just outside on our deck to enjoy the fresh air and view. One day I was doing some schoolwork while Charlie was sitting outside, and I was supposed to be keeping an eye out on him. He was having a lovely old time chirping and jumping around, and so I just went about my work. I hate where this is going already. A little while later, I noticed that the chirping sound had stopped. I think at first I just assumed Charlie had fallen asleep from having so much fun. That seems highly unlikely. But after a while, I got up to check if he was okay. To my horror, Charlie was nowhere to be found and had instead been replaced by a massive carpet python who had a Charlie-shaped lump in his belly. It was very hard to explain to my grandmother that while looking after her depressed bird, I had let him be eaten by a snake. Cheers, Mark. Wow, that is absolutely awful. And it reminds me of the episode of The Simpsons with Lumpy the school snake, which is like the school snake is eating all the students, and Principal Skinner is showing Superintendent Chalmers around the school, and he points to Lumpy the school snake, and you can see the lumps of all the students he's eaten inside him. Always send in your birder stories, any bird story. I feel like we now have two segments. Let's make it Bird Stories, the original segment, is for good bird stories, and then How to Get Away with Burder is for bad bird stories. So yeah, feel free to send in any bird story, good or bad, and I will appropriately slot them into their best segment. One more thing that I've been doing over the last little while is acoustic guitar covers, or like pub guitar covers of hip-hop songs, because I just think they sound really out of place and the lyrics are really funny outside of their context. So the most recent one I did, which is on my Instagram, radio.mike, I post a lot of funny videos and etc. there. The most recent one I did was of Lose Yourself by Eminem. I'll put the audio of it here.
His palms are sweaty, his weak arms are heavy. There's vomit on his sweater already. Mom's spaghetti. On the surface he looks calm and ready to drop bombs, but he keeps on forgetting what he wrote down. The crowd goes so loud. He opens his mouth, but the words won't come out. Yeah, he's choking now. They're joking now. The clock's run out. Time's up. Over blow. Back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity. Oh, there goes rabbit. He choked. He's so mad, but he won't give up. That is he know. He won't have it. He knows he's hold back to these ropes. Don't matter. It's dope. He knows that, but he's broke. He's so stagnant. He knows when he goes back to his mobile home. That's when it's back to the lab again. No, this old rhapsody better go capture this moment and hope it don't pass him. Lose yourself, the music, the moment.
So those have been really fun, and suggest any Eminem songs that you'd like me to try and cover, because I am trying to... I really want to end up doing an EP. Like, I want to end up doing an EP of... I actually probably already have an EP. So in the past, I've done Soulja Boy, or Crank That Soulja Boy by Soulja Boy. I've done Without Me, Eminem, Lose Yourself, Eminem, It's Tricky by Run DMC, and Smack That by Akon. So that's 5 tracks, and I want to do them into a proper acoustic EP that's kind of like a comedy little thing. So that's a project I'm working on. But again, at the moment, I'm so flat out that a lot of my projects are moving very slowly, so I apologize for that, but I am always maintaining the fact that I'll always get 20th Century Boy up every week, and I'm glad you're here. The other thing I just wanted to very quickly talk about is, as a lot of you will probably know, I have a band. The band is called Release the Sounds. In one of our lead singles, the Instagram song, there is a line in it that I'll just play for you, actually. It goes like this. I saw the guy from MasterChef on the street. A photo for my Instagram would be sweet. I asked for a selfie and he says yes. You're the best, Gary Meaghan, first celebrity guest. So the lyric talks about this fictional selfie that I have taken in the song with Gary Meaghan, who was one of the long-term judges on the Australian MasterChef. Here's what I want to find out from you guys. Multiple times in the past 2 or 3 weeks, I have actually seen Gary Meaghan in the office at work. I'm pretty sure he does a podcast using the studios at my work, and I just don't know what the etiquette is here. I really want to go up to Gary Meaghan and take the selfie that I mention in the song. I finally want to have the selfie with Gary Meaghan that I talk about in the song, that I sing about in the song. But I just feel like if I take that selfie, I don't know, it just feels like if I take the selfie, I'm like completing the song. And I kind of like that the fact that the song is always open. And maybe I never get the selfie with Gary Meaghan, but I just sit there conflicting with myself because I'm like, well, it's so close. It is literally within arm's reach. I could just go up to him and be like, hey, Gary, could I get a selfie? And it wouldn't be weird, and he wouldn't know about the song. I don't know. What do I do, guys? Do I go up to Gary Meaghan and ask him for the selfie, or do I just never complete the song? I really want to know. Please let me know. One more thing that we definitely have to talk about is, sorry guys. Do I hear wedding bells? I'm sorry. Do I hear wedding bells in the studio? Because 2 listeners of this podcast have officially met through this podcast, and after talking a lot online and denying their love for each other, they have gone on a date and they are having movie nights together, and I just think this is so wholesome. It's Radio Christina and Radio Ganbort. Welcome both of you to the radio family. Wow. I think this is just so wholesome. Do I take credit for it? Of course. Of course I do. This was my doing. A lot of this relationship, this new young relationship, is due to me and my work on this podcast, and I think we'd all agree on that. I have talked about it on the podcast before and suggested it, but we always get some like shy laughter. But it has finally been confirmed by Radio Christina herself, who says, I thought I would message you to tell you that me and Mitch finally were able to go on an actual date. So it is a thing now, I think. And this is so wholesome. I think we should all be very proud of ourselves, particularly me, because it was my podcast that brought this love together. But if it doesn't work out, we take no responsibility for the relationship at all. Happy to take credit for it while it's good, not going to bear responsibility for it while it's bad. Good luck, guys. But I actually think it's really cool that people are meeting and, finding friends and partners and stuff through podcasts and shared interest in podcasts. It's absolutely awesome. I know 2 very long-time listeners of this show, High Donator Disappointment Judman, listened to last year if you want an explanation for that name. And Radio Superstar Pat, again, listened to last year if you want an explanation on that name, became friends through this podcast. So it's really awesome to see you guys interacting. And that's just another reason to get on board in the Discord or the Facebook group and get to know other people who listen to similar podcasts to you. Before we wrap up, there is one more update I want to give. Over the past few weeks on the show, I've been talking extensively about the potential crime syndicate that I believe is being run, and I always lower my voice when I talk about this on the show because I record this from my apartment, and I believe that there is a crime syndicate running in the laundry of the bottom floor of this apartment. For those who don't know, it started out as me sort of seeing some weird people that I don't think live here in the laundry, not doing laundry, but doing shady stuff, like leaving the building immediately upon me seeing them, etc., etc. Last week there were police all around the car park of the building, including a police helicopter. It looked like they were looking for someone. And I asked you guys to send in any information or tip-offs you may have, and one of them has come in. Now, I believe we have a very, very interesting lead here, so I'm just going to play you the tip-off that I've received from the phone number of the podcast, 1-800-GET-FUCKED, GETFKD. This is what came in this week, and it's very telling.
Oh, hey, is this Mike Stoppers? Someone told me to give you a call, man, 'cause I've been going to this apartment block in Melbourne, and I've been picking up some drugs in the laundry room, and usually I get them off this sort of nerdy guy called Mike, so I was just giving you the tip, but I think the cops are looking for him. But it said last time I saw him that his name was Cheez, and I thought you might know something about him, so try and catch the bloke named Cheez.
So whoever this is, they claim to be a person who is getting drugs off someone called Mike from the laundry. Now, I'm not sure if they're trying to set me up here and accuse me of being the person distributing the drugs from the laundry, which I am not, by the way, or if the person doing the drugs is also called Mike, Druggy Mike. Now, this definitely opens a door to something else that I've just thought of, which is a character on this show from last year. Well, not a character, he was the production assistant on this show last year, and his name was Siggy Mike. And he was a known drug user, cigarette smoker, which is fine. I wonder if this is related or linked to that. I haven't heard from Siggy Mike for a while. He hasn't been on this podcast at all this year, but maybe something's opening up with him. I don't know. Any other leads or tip-offs you have, please send them in. You know where to send them. Any information will help close this case. Thank you. So, aside from investigating a crime syndicate in my laundry, declaring war on podcasts and several other shambles, life is pretty much business as usual for me this week. I hope your life is going well. Why am I still whispering? We're not in that segment anymore. That is pretty much all we've got time for. Again, I strongly recommend you check out Jack's new podcast, Jacky Road Studios. I know he's got some great guests coming up, including, and one I'm really excited for, Ryan Shelton. I don't know if I was supposed to say that, but I know for a fact that Ryan Shelton is going to be on Jack's podcast soon. Make sure you drop subliminal hints to Christian O'Connell if you see him or interact with him in any way. That would be great. And definitely go and check out Morningwood with Zach and Josh. There's a lot of fun. I pop in from time to time. And of course, the Popped podcast, which is my other podcast, which is a more in-depth look at pop culture that me and one of my best friends, Alex, have been consuming in the week that was. We do a round table of all the stuff we've been watching, playing, listening to, etc. in the week of the podcast. Then we dive into the news, and then we talk about a whole bunch of stuff. And there's a thread for that in the Discord as well. Would love for you to get on board that. A lot of people have been listening, and we are really grateful for that. So please check it out. Popped, a pop culture podcast. Here's a grab from this week's episode.
I want like another Diddy Kong racing game. If I was getting another kart racer, like I'd actually really like a new Diddy Kong racing.
Really? I actually hate Diddy Kong racing. I think no, I'm not joking around. Like I just think I go back and play that game and I think this is the worst kart racing game I've ever played. Like it is just clutching at straws for what Mario Kart and Crash Team Racing did. And yeah, this is Radio Comic, Radio Comic, Radio Mike signing off. And as I always say at the end of this show, well, I've fucked it, but I normally say my name is Radio Mike, and this has been the inside of my mind. # spread your wings, nacho cheese.